So welcome to the Grow with Ryan Magic podcast. Today I'm here with an incredible woman, a really good friend of mine, Niyc Pidgeon, who's just an absolute weapon. And I'm so excited to be on the call for us to connect and for you guys to learn from Niyc's wisdom. The first thing I wanted to start with this kind of chat and the direction I want to lead it down is I had a little bit of a realization just then that you've just got really high receiver codes. You've got high deservability. And like we were talking before we jumped on the podcast, and we're having a little catch-up chat about the fact that your kind of style that you do really well with is being in a good vibe and energy and then allowing things to come to you. And this is something that's been difficult for me, being a bit of a control freak, or kind of like being young and being like, I've got to create my life. I'm going to force things to work and put in a lot of effort. Whereas with you, you have really, really solid and high deservability. And that's shown across your relationships and your ability to really know who you want to be with, what you want that experience to be like. That comes across with your business, your friendships, your lifestyle. The way that you live your life is a high value life that reflects to exactly what you want your reality to be like. So talk to me about how is this something that's natural for you, or have you built this self-worth and deservability? Talk to me about that.
Is that a word? I love it.
Deservability?
Yes.
Yeah, I read it in I got this really mini little book from this tiny shop in Bali once, and I just opened up to a page and it was like deservability, and I was like, that word resonates with me because I felt like I grew up without much. And it's been a huge intention to raise that deservability.
I love it. I'm totally going to steal it. So thank you for that.
Please.
Thank you for your recognition of that, and for actually acknowledging me as being that person that has a lot of deservability. I appreciate that reflection. So I feel like I've always had a knowing that I was meant for something big. I've always had a real sense of connection to my desire of what I want to create in this lifetime.
From what age?
Do you know when it started? And I don't think I've really been asked this question before. When I was in primary school, so when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I used to love to read. And I was always taught that I was reading adult books at the age of a child. So I think from that point on, I knew that there was something going on where I had a capacity to actually know more, or see more, or understand more, or, like you say, allow more. Yeah. But I feel like in terms of real receiving, that has only come through in the last 5 years or so. Yeah. Because I was very much in the hustle mode. And whilst a lot of good things have happened for me in my life, I don't think I was really attuned or aligned with the true potential of what was possible until about 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I want to tap more into the transition from kind of forcing to receiving. But before we do, I remember listening to a speaker when I first kind of got into being a coach, and I first got into personal development. And I remember thinking when I first got into personal development, I just feel like I'm this little dude that's trying to make it. Is kind of my perception of myself. And I remember listening to this guy, Calvin Coils is his name, who was a client of mine at this stage. And I listened to him speak on stage, and he said something similar to what you said there. He said, I really feel like I was chosen to do something big. I really feel as though I was meant to do big things. And at that point, I transitioned from I kind of, when he first said it, I went, oh, wow, this guy's meant for something. And I was like, hang on a second, that's just a choice. You can choose to feel that you're meant to do something significant and make an impact and live a life that is exciting. So was it something that, what's your perspective on that? Do you feel like people have the ability to choose their reality?
100%. I feel like we all have the option of how we think, how we speak, what we attract, and there's varying different degrees and layers that you can dive into. In terms of you can go can learn about manifestation, or you can learn about The Secret, and you can do those subtle kind of think what you want to happen in your life, and it will. Visualization. We all know these processes from positive psychology, from the mindset work that we all do, from the books that we read. And I really know that there's so much more that is nuanced about that. It's not just one thing. It's more of it's like a lifestyle. It's a personality. It's a sense of character. It's a robustness that you integrate within yourself, rather than it being as simple as just thinking your way to success.
Yeah, it sounds very much a beautiful summary, that it's about who you are at your core, not what you do. I feel like a lot of people kind of have the goals and they're like, oh, that's the goal. But how? And they get really caught in the detail. And I even find myself, whenever I get in this trap of thinking how and getting really stuck in the detail or the strategy, I find myself feeling really disempowered. When I focus on the what and the why as well, and I get into just focusing on being what it is that I want to create, then it's not like there's a distance between where I am and what I want to create, because it's this desire that I don't have and I'm going to get. I'm not even thinking about what I want to create all the time. It's just like I'm being what I want to create, and then it naturally just eventuates. And I feel like it is an embodiment. So was that a part of your transition from kind of forcing to allowing over the last 5 years? Or talk to me about.
I think awareness has always been a big thing for me. So before embodying anything, I think it's an awareness of who you want to be and what you want to create, and also what choices that means that you get to make. So rather than it being like, oh, I want to create this result, I want to be successful, so what does Tony Robbins, or like, what does a leader that you want to be like, what do they do and who are they? Like, I kind of started from that place, and I started from, okay, show up and do a morning ritual and do all of the basic things. Now it's more about like leaning into areas of your life where perhaps you can get really honest and really vulnerable about you've been out of integrity in some way, or you've been ashamed, or you've been hiding something. Because at the higher levels, like, your capacity to receive, I believe, goes hand in hand with your willingness to actually peel back these layers. So if I look at who I was 5 years ago versus who I am now, like, I'm way more steadfast and way more stable and secure in who I am and my ability to receive than I was even 5 years ago. And I think the work that I had to do to even get to the point that I was at in 2015, when, like, we're talking, like, for me, the shift that I saw was my ability to first financially receive. Like, I feel like I've always had really, really great relationships, and people always compliment me on that. And that's because from the start, I've always invested into relationships, and I've always found it very easy to do so. Financial receiving, I did not find easy. I didn't grow up being rich or anything like that, and I was always told that I couldn't have what I wanted. So I had to do a lot of reprogramming, and that started from when I did my healing and when I went through my trauma work. So I went through a lot of work around having been raped, and when I was bullied when I was a kid, and I tried to take my own life. So those things in 2014 really allowed me to step fully into the woman that I was becoming. And then I thought I had it all figured out, Ryan. I was like, I'm good now. I've done the work. Okay, cool. And then as you progress, you realize that at every phase of growth, there's always going to be a new opportunity to peel back another layer, or to illuminate an area where you're like, oh, like, now I remember that, and actually potentially I didn't deal with that thing as well as I could, or I feel ashamed about that thing, so I need to resolve this conflict within myself now to be able to go on to receive and achieve so much more.
Yeah, I love this so much. We were talking about this last night with Alex and Cal. Who did you met Alex Tripod in Mastermind when you exactly. Yeah, we were talking about this last night, about how the healing process is such an ongoing thing. But I feel as though this is a similar metaphor with business. Like, when you start in business, everything is kind of against you logically, because you don't have case studies. You've got the least confidence you've ever had in that business. You don't know if your idea is proven. You've got less money. You've got less proof. Everything, you got less time, or you're transitioning out of a job, and everything is kind of working against you in a way. Just logically, we can obviously use our positive psychology and mindset to then get in a more empowered state about it. But just logically, everything's against you. And it's the start of the healing process. It's when you're like the least healed. You are the most desperate to get what you want,
Yeah.
the most attached to getting everything that you want. And it's like you're the most insecure, and you have the least belief in yourself that you'll ever have on your healing journey, really, because it's always you always grow and expand, and you don't de-evolve. You can revisit things from the past, but you never de-evolve. Even if you go back and relapse on a diet, or you go back to bad habits, you never de-evolve. So you're always in a stronger position. So when you start on the healing journey, I feel like it's really important for anyone that doesn't feel like their inner work has resulted in that outer result that they really want, their reality that they want to create, that the process of transformation from peeling back those layers and looking at your traumas, looking at your sense of self-worth and why you don't unconditionally love yourself. What situations did you do that you hold shame with, or how were you treated by your parents or significant parental figures when you were younger? And all this kind of stuff that makes us believe that we're anything less than deserving of full love, that we're anything less than love. It's so important to understand that that process of unraveling is such a ongoing process. And even for me, like I got success from just feeling insecure and then needing to compensate by doing a bunch of action to feel good about myself. But then when I took that action away, I felt terrible about myself. But I thought I was like, that was all that I knew. And I thought that state was what I could create. And that this life is just the best life that I could possibly live. But I didn't realize how fragile I was. I didn't realize how sensitive I was. And I hadn't yet taken the time, even at the initial, like I hadn't done much of the initial healing work that most people would do around looking at my inner child's traumas and really having that compassion and empathy for what I went through growing up, and seeing myself and loving myself. And so if you're listening to this and you haven't started that work, start it and realize that it is amazing and liberating and empowering, and you'll feel what it is that you hope that the external things you're looking for will give you. You'll feel that internally, but it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think it's so important to be okay with that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I actually really respect about you. Like, I feel like you've always ran head first into everything that you like have an awareness of being able to like master. And I feel like your willingness to self-master is just like, it's amazing. You've got a huge capacity to be like, listen, I don't know it all. Like, I'm going to go and learn. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to witness.
Thank
I
you.
think like so much of this process is about trusting the journey and also trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time you realize that you think you trust yourself, but in fact you don't.
Yeah.
So that's been some of my work to look at where potentially I've made, it's never a bad decision because you always learn something. So I don't believe in or anything like that, but I've noticed in the past I've made decisions based on putting trust outside of myself, whereas intuitively I knew that I could make a decision based on what I felt and what I knew, but I thought somebody else knew better.
What's an example of that? Is this just with decision making where people might say, well, this business is right for you, or you should be doing more of this, or find a guy that's more like this? Right? What's an example of where?
Like a specific example of like not trusting myself is, I remember I had a choice to get involved with a live event where I would be speaking on stage, but I wouldn't be paid. And instead of being paid, I would sell tickets and I would be paid for selling the tickets. Now, intuitively, it didn't feel like a right fit for me. Like you say, I'm great with relationships and I love like the feeling of energy where you're like, this feels really good, let's do it.
Yeah.
And my partner that I was with at the time said, that's a no-brainer, Nick. You're going to make so much money from selling the tickets. So I think you should do it. And I was kind of feeling inside of myself, it's not right. Even if I get a lot of money, it doesn't feel right. So
Yeah.
I went against my intuition and I went with a decision that somebody else thought that I should make based on money and based on his level of success, which ultimately backfired because what happened was the event got cancelled and the person ended up stealing a lot of money off people. And then it was my brand that took the hit for that because I had recommended it. So
Wow.
it was interesting. It was a great learning for me on so many different levels, both in a business capacity, but primarily in this capacity of trusting myself. And it was
Yeah.
hard because I felt all of the things. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed for making a bad decision. So I had work to do around that. And I always see that whether it is something that doesn't go to plan or somewhere where you wish you trusted yourself and you didn't, it's always a good thing.
Oh,
Everything is
yeah.
always a good thing because it always
Yeah.
helps to grow.
Yeah. And I feel like that's just, I would call that spirituality. Like I summarize spirituality with surrender, just learning to trust in something bigger than yourself. And I feel like it really helps giving confidence because then you don't have so much pressure on you. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to make everything work. It's just like the universe has got me. And then everything that happens, you can just trust and know that the universe is gifting you, even if it's not what you want. It's always what you need, and there's always a gift in it. And I love that reframe. But I feel like you tapped into such an valuable topic there. There were two real big ones. One was the theme of trusting yourself, and not holding any times where you made a decision that didn't result in where you didn't trust yourself, not holding shame around certain decisions that you've made. And that's a really big one. And then the second part is just understanding intuition. And when I was listening to you, it was just kind of assumed that you're in touch. Like I feel like you normalize the fact that you're even in touch with your intuition. Because for me, when I was running Winning and I was like in my more fast growth business success craze days, in that time, I didn't even really, I was so blocked off and so in my head that I couldn't even feel my intuition. Like I just missed things so clearly because I feel like intuition and being in touch with spirit and and that divine intelligence that flows through you, gut feel, intuition, whatever you want to call it, is such a subtle thing. It's like the more subtle that you are and quiet that you are, the louder that voice is. And because I was so loud in my head, it was just, and busy, it was impossible to hear that. And I remember like Danny, early in that relationship, my partner, she at that time, when at one point when I was growing really quickly, she just made a call that there was a dude in the business I couldn't trust. And he was such a nice guy. He was so nice. And he was the key person in my business. He was like my operations manager that managed like heaps of people in the team. And I was just like, he's just so like you're being just ridiculous. And I'm sick of these calls that you make on random people when you don't even know them. And I was all frustrated by it because it interrupted my plan. It wasn't what was convenient for me to hear this. And so he said, you can't trust him. And I was just like, it's just based off nothing. I was like, you're not basing this off anything. You're just making it based off a feeling. But that feeling is her tapping into her intuition. And she's so perceptive. And I was so blocked off from my intuition. And this guy, like 3 or 4 months later, ended up stealing a bunch of money. He cost about $700,000 in damages and just like sabotaged a bunch of stuff in the business. And I had no idea because I was so disconnected from my perceptive awareness and my feeling and my intuition. You at least at that point could feel and you were connected to your intuition. You just hadn't learned to fully trust it. And I feel like the reason why a lot of people can't trust their intuition is because intuition is, in my, like a way that I've recently framed it, which I really love, is aligned discomfort. Intuition is aligned discomfort. Like it's because it's designed for you to evolve. That's its purpose, because the purpose of the universe, in my opinion, is fulfillment, which is love and growth, or like connection and evolution. Intuition leads you to greater connection opportunities, but its designed purpose is to evolve and for you to grow. And you only grow in the unfamiliar. So when you do something that's intuitive, it's aligned, it's exciting, it feels expansive. It's what you really want, but it's still scary at the same time because you've never ventured there before. And so, yeah, I feel like it's really important for people to understand that around their intuition and learn to trust it. But a lot of people don't trust it because of that, the discomfort element in there.
Yeah.
and they never, and so they're always kind of suppressing their intuition because it goes against their ego and their control center and their safety center because it feels unsafe, because it's scary. And then they never form like the track record of evidence to then back it. And I feel like the power of your intuition and your ability to trust it comes off following it and realizing how powerful it is. But if you never follow it, you never realize how powerful it is.
So true. It comes from practice, and it comes from listening. I did a like a big 6-page spread in Psychology's magazine about intuition, like a good few years ago now, must be not 3 years ago. And that was on how do you determine the difference between intuition and fear.
Wow, that's such a cool article to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about it.
It's a good point that you make, because you're like, intuition is scary and it's actually guiding you somewhere. And I think that we must trust that as we lean into our intuitive knowing, the path which unfolds is going to be the right path, even if it's hard, like you say.
Yeah.
So I shared in an article that the first thing that we all have to do is get quiet, because sometimes our intuition, it's not this raw. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, do not get in the car, you're going to die today, something bad's going to happen, do not get in the car. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's like that, like just intuitive, like, whoa. But most of the time, it's this like tiny whisper, and it's like a nudge in the right direction. And it's easy to ignore, or it's easy to pretend, or it's easy to go the safe route, or it's easy to listen to someone else. But actually what you'll notice is that you come further and further away from yourself when you don't listen to your intuition. And it's like, it's amazing to know, and to know what you're here on this planet to do, and to be able to wake up in the morning and get out of bed and just be like, I'm doing the thing that I'm meant to do. And I always feel so grateful for that. And I know not everybody else has that. Yeah. But once you do start to step into your purpose, and once you do start to say yes to your desires rather than other people's desires for your life, then it becomes easier and easier. So my first intuitive hit was when I was like 17, 18, and I was supposed to become a mechanical and automotive engineer. And my intuition
I know you like cars, but I still don't see you in that space.
You know what? You actually started this interview by saying you're a weapon. And one of my favorite memories of you is actually when you brought me that Lamborghini racing drive
for your birthday
3 years ago. And I'd come to pick you up on Sunset Boulevard in the rental car with the videographer in the back. And you opened up the car door and you went, "Good morning, you weapon." That's an amazing memory for me. So thank you.
That was a really amazing weekend.
It was so good, wasn't
hiring Justin Bieber's old mansion and just having some incredible people at that. I'm actually interviewing. Say that again.
Bob Marley's chef.
Oh yeah, that guy was mega cool. He's like, there were some really cool memories from that. And I'm actually interviewing Mel Wells on the podcast soon as well, which is really exciting.
That'll be juicy. Sex magic.
Yeah, she's really cool. She's super. I really love her authenticity. She's such an amazing.
She's just literally been voice noting me. So
she's so cool. I love her.
Yeah, awesome.
And Rick as well. I really want to get to know Rick. I feel like he's so mysterious.
Well, you know, Rick's my friend from Newcastle.
Oh, so Rick is. Oh, because I remember that you hooked those two up.
Yeah, Rick. Then Mel will tell you the story. I'll let her tell you, but
I remember being told, but I just don't remember.
Yeah, you're in for a treat when you hear the story of how Mel and Rick met.
Yeah. No, I remember that it was something to do with you hooking them up.
It was something to do with a psychic hooking them up.
Oh.
And yeah, it's crazy. So how Rick and I met was like totally wild, because someone connected us. I was in Australia, he was in Switzerland, and a mutual friend in Newcastle connected us. And then Mel ended up getting together with him, and they've been together for years and are totally madly in love.
Yeah.
And Mel and I obviously are both with Hay House. So it was like a crazy triangulation. She's literally like a sister to me now. And I'm like, it's so crazy.
Yeah, that's super cool. There's this quote that I really love that I want to share, because it was one of my friends, Phil Noseworthy, who's a speaker, and he's more of like an executive kind of he's not an executive. He's more of like a corporate speaker. He goes and speaks to huge organizations on stage to help people with their performance. But he's just like a really interesting guy. And he's got this quote. Once I was kind of like tossing up between fear from that place of me purposely pushing myself through fear, from like almost like I believe it should be hard kind of thing. And then also like fear and to do with intuition and the fact that when you chase what you really want at the same time, it also requires some discomfort and fear. And he said this really cool thing, which was, without fear, there's no space for faith. And it just hit me. So it's like one of my favorite quotes: without fear, there's no space for faith. And it essentially means like, if you can be an intuition or intellect, and intellect is your ego, and it's what keeps you, it's what you have control over and what makes you feel safe because it's familiar. And your intuition is like something higher that's guiding you on your dream path, but it's always unfamiliar. Then if you just like, without fear, there's no space for faith. What that means is like, if you don't embrace fear and discomfort, then you've already got everything handled. You don't even need to trust the universe because you already know what you're doing. You're just like going about the same old job or the same old relationship that feels comfortable and safe. If you want to like inscript and like ask the universe for help, then you need to actually let them do their work. You need to like let God actually play a part on your journey. And God's only going to be able to come in handy where you don't already know what's going to happen. Like there's no point saying, hey, God, can you help me do what I already know to do every single day and just take steps while within my comfort zone. God can step in and the intuition can support you when you're venturing outside and you're chasing something that is that desire that excites you. And that's where you actually need to have space for faith. But without the fear, what do you even need faith for? You've already got it kind of handled. I just really love that. I feel like it's super.
I love that as well. And I feel like we also need to like look up, and we need to like, it comes back to this awareness thing. Like some people are like putting faith into something, or they are trying to manifest, or they're on a spiritual path, but then they're also at the same time doubting themselves and doubting the higher power. Have you ever read the book Trust by Ayana Vazant? You should read that. I haven't. It's an amazing book. It's like if you're not putting your trust into yourself and into a higher power on purpose, then you're not fully in. You're not in for the ride. You're not saying yes to everything that's possible. And I love looking for the tiny little things, the tiny little synchronicities, or like times where somebody shows you that you're on the right path. Those little nudges. Like silly things, like for this particular interview, when you sent me the link, I looked on the link and it was like 4444, which is my lucky number. I was like, I love it, magic. Or like some people, like someone told me before, they like walked up to me in the street and they were like, you don't just have a guardian angel, you've got a team of angels behind you, standing behind you on this path.
I think I remember that. Was that some rich dude before your 30th birthday?
No, but who was that?
There's a whole other story.
Someone else said that to me.
Oh, I think no. I think that was for what's your friend's name? The gorgeous blonde Erin.
Erin. Yeah, got it, Erin.
I think
I'm seeing her today as well.
You saw her today?
I'm seeing her tonight.
Oh, say hi for me. I hope she's well.
She's amazing.
Yeah. Do you know Lindsey Stirling, the violinist?
No, who's that?
She's like this dancing pixie violinist that does electronic dance music, and she dances around with her violin. She's got an incredible story, because I think she's got like 80 million subscribers on YouTube, but she originally tried to she had a passion for playing violin. She's kind of got a passion for what's it called? Cartoons that are like Sailor Moon. So it's like anime stuff. She's got a passion for electronic dance music and dancing and expression. And she said to her friends, like right at the start of her journey, like, this is what I want to do. I want to combine playing the violin with electronic dance music with dancing. And like, if someone came to me and said that a few years ago, I'd think you're nuts, but legitimately, because it's just kind of like a weird combo.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, what's going to happen there? And then she really went after it, and she went on America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
And she actually made it through the initial round because she's really expressive and passionate, and it's her purpose. Yeah. And she actually, do you remember it now?
I don't remember it, but I just look like one of my favorite things is seeing people highly expressed. You
Yeah.
know, when you see someone that's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing on the
Yes.
planet, isn't it the best feeling?
It's so
It's
good.
like, oh, it's like,
I feel like you just can't help but like cheer them on. And she did this
so good.
thing, and she got slammed by the judges in like after the first few rounds of America's Got Talent, and they said that it's like her violin sounded like a rat's being strangled, and she would never sell out any arena, and this isn't a viable career path. And then she just like, she got off and she said she cried for hours and hours and hours, and she just got back up and kept going forward. And now she's literally like, she tours around the world and fills stadiums doing her thing. And I listen to her. She's got a couple of songs that I really love. One's called Elements and one's called Crystallize. And they're just like these deep, electronic songs that make you feel so. I'll send them to you after. They're so cool. And she did an interview with Jay Shetty recently, and she was talking on that about how she just believes that she grew up in a religious family. She just chooses to believe that she's got angels looking out for her, and in miracles, like every day, that's a miracle. Or, oh my gosh, like I wanted it to be sunny today, and it's sunny. Like that's a miracle. And she's just constantly seeing everything as like these little small, like what you said, nudges or whispers or miracles in everything. And I feel like it's such a high vibe state. Even if you just look from a logical level, when someone's being charismatic and they're connected to their heart, you just want to help them. You want to be around them. You want to support them. And if the universe is like a reflection, or you can have a relationship with the universe, if that's the way that you're showing up in the universe, then the universe is going to want to support you.
It's a hell yes from the universe.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh, I love that. So tell us about actually, there's one thing that I want to go a little bit deeper into, because I feel like we skip past, and I feel like it's just the biggest thing ever, which is this idea of having layers of trauma that we work through over time. So, but for people that are listening that don't fully understand what this is, or how do you develop greater levels of self-worth, because you said you went from forcing things and you were struggling to break through financially, and then 5 years ago you had a pinnacle shift when you worked through a lot of your kind of like self-worth stuff and trauma stuff and forgave yourself and worked through shame stuff. Can you talk about like, how can people start that journey? Like, how do they start working through things? How do they start looking beneath the surface and actually developing that unconditional self-worth and doing that healing?
Yeah, there's so many different modalities that you can use, like on this exploration, and so many different ways that you can go, that I feel like it's not one path for all people. And I feel like there's a gateway for each of us that we can recognize as being the beginning of our journey. For some people, it might be nutrition. So they might find that they want to like get into better habits and eat organic and start that way, and that's their gateway. For me, my gateway was positive psychology, and I started looking at how we can go from being good to being great. So that really helped me, because it gave me a lot of tools and it gave me a lot of things that I could work with. You really in this place of life. For me, my first awareness, my first understanding was when I started to not feel good all of the time. When business was hard, my family life was really challenging, my relationship was challenging. And I just thought, you know what, Nick, just keep using the tools, it's going to be all right. And then I remembered being raped. So for me, it was a big trauma, or something that's like traditionally in society viewed as a big trauma. So for me, it was going to look back at that and really doing the healing work with a counselor, where I talked about what the experience was and I made sense of it inside of myself. And I came out of that after a year of therapy in a place where now I'm actually very grateful for that experience, because it's helped me evolve into a really strong woman who can help a lot of people find their strength when they don't see it for themselves. So that's an example of like something that's really big. But what I've learned since then is that not all trauma is a car crash, or getting your leg blown off at war, or being raped, or going through a divorce. Trauma is the tiny little things. So I'll give you an example of something that I've worked on recently. So I've really been working on my sleep over the last year. And it sounds like something that's so basic, but
Got my aura ring on now. I wear an aura
I love
ring.
it. Isn't
That's
it
wind.
amazing tracking your sleep? It's
So good.
fun. So I was waking up during the night, or I was like not sleeping very heavily during the night, not having a good quality sleep. And I got frustrated and I was like, why is this happening? Like, I really want to have a great sleep. So I went to do something called RTT therapy, rapid transformational therapy. And I love it because it's quick. It works in one session. You get like a visualization to listen to before you go to sleep. But what that does, it also like gets you to go back into your past and check in with why you are experiencing the thoughts and the feelings or the behaviors that you're doing right now. So I found from that experience, I had memories of when I was a kid, when my parents were arguing, had a great upbringing, very rarely argued. When my parents were arguing downstairs and I was upstairs and I speak to the top of the stairs and I wanted to go down and have a hug. And they told me, go upstairs, Nicola, like you need to go to sleep. So for me, that was something that as a child was very traumatic because it was a rejection from my parents.
Yeah.
So a trauma doesn't have to be this big thing that's gone on. It could be something that is tiny or perceived to be tiny, but your little brain when you're a kid can't process it in the way that our adult brain will now. So at the time, it sends a new subconscious pattern running.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been taught actually by Erin, who you mentioned before,
Yeah.
Dr. Erin, she said that if you're ever in something which is emotional for you, so if you're ever experiencing an upset or a time of challenge where you feel really emotional, don't beat yourself up. Because if you beat yourself up and you tell yourself that you're bad, or you tell yourself like, oh, you're so stupid, or why has this happened? You actually set a new program in your subconscious that, because you're in such a like malleable emotional state, can set another pattern running into the future. So she always says, like, if you're feeling emotional, be extra kind to yourself, because that's going to build you up rather than tear you down again.
Yeah, well, there's so many things that I would love to say off the back end of that. It's really awesome. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing, you know, your kind of experiences and being so open with it all. I heard from a podcast interview with Ed Milet that negative thoughts are 4 to 7 times more impactful than positive thoughts. So it's like, you could be like, oh, I'd love to manifest this, or like, this is my dream, this is my vision board, I want to be a famous musician. And that's like a positive thought. But then if you said, oh, I can never be a famous musician, that's like 4 to 7 times less valuable just in your thoughts. But then if you say that negative thing out loud to someone or just talking about it, you make it so much more of a reality by actualizing it that it makes it 10 times more powerful in the negative. So it can go from being 40 to 70 times more negatively impactful to say something negative than it is to think something positive. And so it's like,
then think about when you're in an emotional state, the lack of control that many people have over what they think and say, and then how powerful those things are anchored into us as humans
because of the emotional state.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's so crazy. And what was I going to say? The way that I got recently, I've been doing a lot. It's so interesting to have in this chat now, because I'm recently really been focusing on working through a lot of traumas for mine that, again, aren't always so significant, and like I was raped or molested or something like that. But every time you have a trigger, every single time a trigger comes up, it's showing you a part of yourself that you don't unconditionally love. Because if you have an emotional trigger, like a trigger when someone does something, says something, and it like jolts you a bit, where you're like, oh, I feel anxious now, or oh, I feel angry now, oh, I feel frustrated now, or I feel nervous now, or oh, I feel unsafe now. Anytime that happens, when it's not like unless it's like a fight or flight thing where you literally could die, it's a part, it's come from some point in your past, usually when you're a child, when in that moment, as a child, you didn't feel safe, or something happened. And in that moment, as a child, you made a decision that you weren't unconditionally worthy of love. And the reason why is because as kids growing up, and this is a really big distinction, I don't think gets enough credit with adults looking and giving themselves and their own inner child or their own past child, that when you're a child, it's completely different to being an adult because you're solely dependent upon your parents for survival and safety. As an adult, we're dependent upon ourselves. We can just keep ourselves safe. But as a child, our whole safety and survival is based upon our parents. We're completely dependent. So when it comes down to trying to appease our parents or be loved by our parents, love is not just about a nice thing that feels good. If we don't get love, we have a belief as a kid that they may not protect us and therefore we might die. And so that's why these small little traumas and these small incidences when we're younger can be so traumatic, because in that moment we go, far out, we're not worthy of love, but that means that they might not protect me and I might stay unsafe. And that's why we hold on to that and go, avoid that, or don't do that. Or if our parent says, you know, you sing when your family friends are around, and then your mum's like, you be quiet, we've got guests. And you're like, oh crap, if I express myself, I'm not going to be worthy of love and I might not be safe. And so you feel this like significant anxiety because it's fight or flight, like your survival mode's kicked in. And that still plays as parents. So every time you have a trigger that comes up, it's a part of you, it's bringing it, like the universe is saying, you're ready to work through this trauma. It's giving you an opportunity to say, you're ready to love yourself, your own inner child, the way that he or she was never loved initially in that moment, and to correct that false belief that you're not worthy of unconditional love based on that trauma. And it could be anything. Like for me, I went to state football when I was like 10 or something like that. And the dude was like, you know, mate, what are you doing here? Go home. And it hurt my feelings so much that I walked off the field and started crying to my dad. And now recently, I've been really nervous of being rejected by people that I would consider popular kids or popular people. I've just felt unsafe and anxious around them, and then usually act not like myself because I don't feel like I'm worthy of just being myself and being received in that moment because of that trauma. And there would be earlier traumas that I haven't worked through as well. But then when I actually held space for that, all of a sudden I reactivated a feeling of love within myself. And then I could do, like, it was at a time I was nervous of doing a Facebook Live. Then I jumped on the live in a place of love, which just felt so nice. And it was just completely got rid of that kind of like feeling or trauma. And I felt super safe in this feeling of love. But it seems like a small thing, kind of like your parents tell you to go upstairs and go to bed. And like as parents, like I can imagine, because I can even feel it with my dogs. Like, mate, so just piss off, or like I'm doing something, go away, and that could set off a trauma for your kid.
Yeah, I think what's important to like understand and remember is that everybody's doing the best they can with the tools they've got available at the time, whether that corresponds to ourselves or to our parents or to people that we encounter in our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
And when you have come from that like place of compassion, it's much easier to understand like the journey that everybody's on and give yourself grace and give other people grace for the way that they show up or perhaps what's been done in the past. If they're doing this work is very brave. I think that it's a brave thing to be able to look at parts of yourself or things that have happened or things that you've done. It's really brave to take the journey. I think there's a lot of shame around doing trauma work or going to therapy, but it's actually a really cool thing. Really cool.
Yeah. And I feel like it often gets worse before it gets better as well. Like when you start bringing things to the surface and looking at areas that actually make you feel unsafe. Because, but without it, I like the way I'm going to metaphorically frame it right now, just use like this Alex's hair tie. You've got like a circle of possibility. And if you've got a trauma, you physically can't navigate outside your current comfort zone because of that trauma. So every time you work through it, even though you're venturing outside, I'll do it on the white t-shirt, even though you're venturing outside the circle, outside your comfort zone, and you feel unsafe and it's getting worse, you're actually stretching your possibility. Then you can actually achieve more, and you've got the opportunity to do things you otherwise wouldn't. Because I see, like I've thought many times in the past, look, these people are just like quote unquote normal, like living a normal life, and they're not into personal development and stretching themselves. and they don't have this like massive resistance and stuff. And that's because they legitimately just live their lives inside the circle. So things don't come up for them. If there's a trauma, they just avoid it and they just keep going through. But then the possibility of experience is significantly limited. And so I think you really have to ask yourself the question, like, do you want to continue to uncover opportunities for expansion and experiences you otherwise wouldn't have? And that's what I know you're about. That's what I'm about. That's why we gel so well. We're just like, I want to live the most incredible awesome life. Like, let's
bring me the growth, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and then like, be careful what you ask for. Then you get through it, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's always worth it. It's also sometimes it's like a responsibility, like, because you've signed up for this journey of growth and leadership and creating an impact and having a contribution. And you know that you can have the highest contribution when you are fully expressed, which means always leaning in to doing the work, always
love that.
Like peeling back these layers, always like putting your hands up and saying, listen, like I was out of integrity there and I'm sorry, like I did something that I'm not proud of, or here's where I felt ashamed. Like I wrote a list last year of all of the things I felt ashamed of in my life, and I shared them with a friend, and then I started to share them on social media. And when I first shared them with my friend, she was like, whoa, that's so interesting that you were ashamed of that. So I'll give you an example, 2 examples actually. So one example was—
this is vulnerable leadership right here.
I was ashamed of when I made my first million. I spent it all. So like, I think people think like when you make 7 figures in a business, it's sitting in the bank. And it wasn't. Like I'd reinvested in coaching and team, in travel.
Yeah.
And I literally, whilst I had equity in my business and my brand, I didn't have $1 million in the bank.
Yeah.
So I felt ashamed for making $1 million and having nothing to show for it. The fact is I did. I had funnels and all of the things, but financially it didn't have a lot to show for it.
Yeah.
So I carried that with me for probably 2 years before I started to actually share, like, this is what my journey looked like. And I was really ashamed of that. And then little things as well, like when I go on photo shoots, I used to always get, you're going to look for this now. When I go on photo shoots, I always got my photographer, Bri, to like edit my knees. Because I'm like, why do my knees look like that? Like a lot of girls have really skinny, bony knees, and I just don't. And it made me feel really uncomfortable until I acknowledged that I was like ashamed of my knees.
Yeah.
And then actually now it doesn't bother me anymore.
Well, thank you for being so vulnerable on like a body thing. Because, and by the way, men are very like one-dimensional when it comes to looks. It's the talk is usually like, oh, she's hot or not.
Yeah.
And with a woman, it's like, I really like that guy's like the outer ridge of his nostril. And you're like, what the hell? It's so specific. I love his eyelashes towards the side. It's like,
it's so funny. It's so funny. Like we're all so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think like when I wrote this list, I read it to my friend Alyssa, who's amazing. You should have her on the podcast as well.
Cool.
I'll introduce you. So I shared with her, and she just like met me with so much love and so much understanding and so much curiosity around, whoa, that's so interesting that you felt like that. Another one actually was I signed up for a modeling agency when I had no money back in Newcastle, and I got scammed. So I paid them money and they told me I was beautiful, and they were like, come and do this thing, like everyone thinks that you're great, and then they stole my money. So I felt like I was really ashamed of that because I thought I was beautiful because somebody told me that, and because they scammed me, I wasn't. And when I shared that with my friend, she was like, oh my goodness, something like that happened to me too.
Wow.
So, and it's really interesting because that was something that for a long time I felt so badly about, and I just pushed to one side until I sat down and wrote this list. The power of the list, honestly.
Guys, I'm really inspired. I'm really inspired from this list. Like I'm going to get off here and I'm actually going to write a list myself because I've worked through some shame things, but I know there'll be lots lingering there that I haven't worked through, and I haven't actually written a list. So thank you for sharing that. It's like super powerful and it's super simple. And one other thing that I want to mention there is like you are great at cultivating relationships, but it's because you really are a great friend and you give a lot to relationships, and you also know what relationships support and nurture and serve you. And I feel like so many people in this space don't have as safe of a environment to be able to share these things. And I feel like when people, like, I really dislike the whole having a dig at each other in friendships, when people like taking the piss and, you know, they put each other down to feel that sense of connection. Brene Brown talks about this. I can't remember the way she talks about it, but it's like false connection. It's like fake connection because you're just putting other people down to get connection.
Yeah, or the other way that I see that happening, especially in our industry, and especially since like the advent of social media, like transactional relationships. So if I help you, you'll help me. And I feel like coming to a relationship with a desire and an intention to support and to help people and to build relationships is the way that we can do it. Yeah. And it shouldn't be with the underlying intention of, I'm going to get something back from it.
Yeah.
I feel like I see so much of that in like the social media space. Or I'm going to make friends with her because she's got a big following and maybe she can do something for me. Like, I just think that's so much bullshit, and it actually hurts people. I have friends who felt very hurt by that. Because people have approached them, I can tell that they're not authentic or they're not committed to actually building a relationship.
I feel like those people would get a worse result. Like if you're going into a relationship to try to get something from someone, they're going to feel that. Like, oh, I don't feel like it would even yield the person with that approach the best result anyway.
Yeah, I feel definitely in the long term, and I feel it makes you. I feel like I've come to this space where I've been this happy-go-lucky, positive psychology girl, where everything's been going great. Then the world kicked my ass for a while. Then everything like took off in terms of like my success, and then the world kicked my ass again. And now I'm in this space where I'm probably a little bit more discerning and cynical than I perhaps once was. And I actually don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a healthy flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I love it. Flavor.
It's a healthy flavor. Sounds like the tagline for a cookbook.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very similar for me as well, because I've been a quote unquote nice guy. And for me, it's a little bit different. It's not about being cynical. It's more like I'm trying to lean into being more authentic. Because for me, as someone who really wants people to like them, because I didn't feel safe in social situations growing up because I was so sensitive and shy, you know, I'm always like that, nice, not like really nice. And I'm trying to lean more into like this is my actual opinion. I'm actually going to say this, or no, I disagree there. And just being willing to be more real so that so it's not fake. Because I feel like I do it subtly, but if we use an exaggerated example, with someone that is just mega nice, and you know they're just saying it because that's their only mode, and you know that it's not true. That's just the way that they say it to everyone. It kind of takes away the meaning. It takes away the specialness around it, because you know it's not real. And so for me, I've really been leaning into, again, it's like personal development is not always being like the bigger person, so to speak. Sometimes it's like putting someone in their place or holding someone to account or like, and I call it like, I actually did a video on it recently that I haven't released yet. It's called like values over diplomacy. It's like people just want to be diplomatic, you know, diplomatic, just like the bigger person, not like politically correct, versus like actually staying true to what you believe in at the risk of being rejected or at the risk of being seen in a way that's not as, you know, pure all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like people are just, especially in this world, are so diplomatic, but then there's a lot of fakeness to it.
Have you ever looked into spiritual bypassing?
I've heard about it, and I
feel like that's like what you're talking about in part.
Cool. Tell
like
us about it.
This idea that everything's peace and love and rainbows. And actually, I don't need to deal with anything because I'm just going to bypass it, and it's like it's all going to be okay. And I feel like in the past I have been that person that perhaps doesn't lean into conflict and doesn't claim like my voice. And I've got a lot better in the past few years at doing that. And it means that I probably had more conflicting situations that previously I would have just avoided, but actually leaning into that conflict has been a wonderful thing, because it's like what we were talking about before, like getting outside of your comfort zone, or intuition being a little bit edgy, or intuition feeling scary. it's like as you lean in and as you step into that thing which feels stretchy for you, you also feel stronger as a result.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
now having a hard conversation isn't hard anymore. It's something that you're like, right, okay, cool, I'm going to do this because this makes me feel good rather than bad now. And
Yeah.
rather than just ignoring it and kind of sidestepping things, just
Yeah.
lean in.
Yeah. Lean in is one of my three main mantras. I've got open up,
Really?
lean in, and make magic are like
I
my
did not
three.
know that promise. I love it.
No, no, no. Use it. It's not like I didn't invent the idea of leaning in, but I love it because I feel like it's something that you can just practically in the moment just do. You can just be like, all right, just lean in. And I think that approach as an intention is just so powerful, and it can help your life just be so much more dense and would have such greater magnitude. But it does take like for me, I still get nervous if I have an uncomfortable conversation, but I just know that it's always, I know that if I don't, there's going to be consequences longer term. And I know that if I do, I'm going to feel more grounded and centered and fulfilled afterwards.
Love that.
This has been such a great chat, Nick. I've got one more question for you before we
Okay.
wrap up. But before we do that, before I ask the question, there's two things I want to do. One is I want to honor you because I'm so impressed with your journey. I've always loved you, even from the moment I mentored you way back in the day, and as friends. And I've just always loved your beautiful radiance. You're just such an earth angel. And I just love your willingness, because you've always, like I started the interview with that deservability, you know what you want to create in the world, and you deserve it and you back yourself, but you do it with so much love. And I don't feel, I feel like I'd be very hard pressed to find someone that has anything even remotely negative to say about you, because you always bring so much love, but then you're also fiercely chasing what you want and creating your most amazing reality. And so thank you for being such an awesome person. Thank you for being such a great friend as well. And I'm really excited that we've reconnected. I feel like we've both been on these crazy journeys over the last few years of growth.
Right.
And so anyway, I want to honor you for that because you're an amazing role model. And the second thing is, where do people find you? Like, where are you? What's your main social platform?
I love Instagram at Niyc Pidge. So I love chatting with everyone across there.
So Niyc Pidge, by the way, is NIYCPIDGE.
Ding, 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 you got it right.
Yeah, NIYC.
And then also on my website, nickpigeon.com. And I'm loving leaning into YouTube and even TikTok at the minute.
Amazing. There's so many cool platforms out there. But I would say, like, what I always encourage my guests to do, because why wouldn't you, just go and follow Nick on Instagram. So just go to Niyc Pidge, NIYC, then PIDGE, and then send her a message. Because I know for me, like, and I've been doing this recently, reaching out for people that I like look up to and I'm inspired by, and I want to interview and have great chats with on the podcast. You can just reach out to anyone. And a lot of people feel like there's just, because that I look up to that person, they're separate or different to me, and they would never want to make contact. But it's so nice to receive a message. Like, if you listen to this and there's something you could resonate with, or something particular that stood out for you, let Nick know, send her a message and make that connection point. It always means the world to the influencer or the thought leader or the coach when they get that message. So please do that. It's really nice. So if you got a follow-up question, she might do a live on it or something like that.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love that. I'd welcome that.
Yeah, awesome. No worries. And so my final question is just as a little bit of a juicy one. What, like, if there was, at the moment, if you were bringing on a new client and the client was going to pay you $1 million and they just said, I only want you to do one thing with me. I only want you to teach me one thing or facilitate me through with one exercise, and I'm going to pay you $1 million to do that. And I really just trust that you're going to choose the most valuable thing for me. And I don't want you to know anything about me. It's not based on where I'm at. It's just what would you choose to teach that person or facilitate for that person?
You know, I love this question. I've never been asked it before.
I
For
came up with
me,
it on the spot, to be honest with you.
did you? Awesome. I love it. So for me, it's not so much about what I would teach. The way that I would do that is I would love to have someone come and actually live with me. Like come and be in my space and in my life and coexist and co-create, and whatever comes through from that. Let's say we did 5 days together here in Los Angeles. That for me would be like the most epic, like giving experience.
Yes.
Because I feel like the in-person connection facilitates so much more.
Yes.
So that would be my answer to that.
Yes. And I think there's so much value from that for anyone that's listening. If you feel called to work with Niyc and pay her $1 million, please do so. It would be a great investment. And just be around people that you look up to and like to be like. It's that old, just all the simple PD principles are the most powerful. Like the 5 people that you spend the most time with, who you end up becoming. It's true. It's 100% true. And if you don't feel like, and you usually choose to spend time with people who you feel like you're at a similar level to, but if you can stretch yourself and just spend time around people that really have the same values and you love them and you feel inspired by them, then you're going to get so much from that. So thank you for that answer. It was fantastic. And thanks so much for jumping on today. I've had an absolute blast.
It's been amazing. Love you so much.
Love you too.